The first thing is you have to have a still air box to do your work in. If you go to the videos, they have this thing turned up right to where when you put stuff in it, you got to take the lid off of it after you've sanitized it. So this one, I actually do mine on the stove, so I can put this on there, lean it up against the stove, and it'll prop itself open. So I can spray it, spray everything, put it in it, and then close it down, you know. Also, part of what I'm going to teach you is a double tub method, and you can prop it open, and the double tubs are too big to work in with it down, so it gives you enough headroom. And this is just a piece of particle board covered with, you can use cardboard or paneling, whatever, cover it with foil. The holes, I cut these with a saber saw, but you could actually use a propane torch, a coffee can, heat it up with a kitchen glove on or something, and melt the holes in, and that's it for that. This is a shotgun fruiting chamber. This is what you'll actually put the BRF cakes into fruiting conditions. And this is one of the points I want to make. You should probably still watch these videos. It's called Let's Grow Mushrooms on YouTube. It's 3 parts. And if you don't go with the double tub and just do a classic PF grow, these are 2-inch holes. The best way I've found is to get a piece of pegboard. They're exactly 2 inches, and lay it out. Drill all those 1/4-inch holes, top, bottom, ends, sides. And one of the things that they don't tell you in the videos is that this can't sit on a surface, because you need the air to be able to come up through the perlite that you're using, for moisture. So it will leak some, so you need another lid. You can take the lid that's on your still air box and use it, and this needs to be elevated to where air will get in through it. I'm going to cover this real quick. It won't apply to most of you. This is a water bath incubation chamber. Unless you are in a real cold climate and your growing area is below 70 to 68, you will never need this. But my house where I grow is cold in the closet. You put a jar in each corner, put a aquarium heater in it. They're adjustable. If you'll start out at about 3/4, it'll give you somewhere around a 78 to 79 degree temperature, which is optimum for incubation. And then you just fill it with water to 1 inch over the tops of these jars. Set this on it, put your thermometer in it, put about a 1/2 cup of hydrogen peroxide or bleach in the water to stop the algae from growing. And it'll increase your incubation, or make the incubation colonization period go faster, which stops some of the stalling. A lot of the problems that I've seen over 10 years is the cake will grow 3/4 and then it stops, and that's where a lot of people have problems. So if it's too cold, slows it down. In extreme situations, this will help you out. So I just wanted to show it. Like I say, most of you won't need it. The double tub method that I'm going to teach you, the advantage to this with a PF Tech grow that's in the videos, when you get your cakes birthed and put them in the shotgun terrarium, then it really needs to be fanned and misted on a regular basis. Most people that are working can't really keep up with how often it needs, and it suffers. You can still grow them, but it won't be as successful. So with these, once you put these together and tape the 2 halves together, it's done until you're ready to harvest. You have, you know, it takes up that much space. It'll produce 1.5 ounces of medicine, dried medicine, just almost every time. And in 9 years, I've never had a contamination issue with one of them. Never lost one. So you start out with these 97-cent Walmart tubs, 3 inches in from each end. In the center of this opaque band, you drill a 3/4 inch hole. The ends, the sides, the top one, you need a hole in the 2 holes in the top, and you split the distance in the clear part, 3 inches from the end, center here. And they end up looking like this. The top one looks like this. And we'll put one of them together when I get through the PF Tech. So a lot of this stuff is going to be hard because of the times constraints to really give you a complete demonstration. So I'm going to talk a lot of this stuff through. The recipe for these brown rice flour cakes is 2 to 1 to 1. 2 parts of vermiculite to 1 part of brown rice flour, 1 part of water. And these contain a cup, so you need basically a 1/2 cup of Verm, a 1/4 cup of BRF, and a 1/4 cup of water. And that's a little bit more than you need because we're going to put a dry Verm layer in. So if you're going to do 10 jars, then you just, you know, it's 5 cups, 2.5 cups, 2.5 cups. So just, you know, regulate it. If you're doing this, it's however many you want to do. If you're doing the mini double tubs, you've got to have 8 of these 1/2 pint jars. The only way I can get it is a 4 cubic foot bag. And the first one lasted me 4.5 years, and I gave 3/4 of it away to other cluster heads. So, you know, it's forever. But it's $45, and the only places I've ever found it is like commercial landscape supply or a big nursery outfit. So you mix it together, fill your jar up, and like I say, watch these videos because they're going to actually show this part of it. I just want to catch the things that I've found that you need some tips on that's been outdated. You fill it up to the bottom of the threads, rings, about a 1/2 inch. Don't pack it down, just level it out and smooth it out. Press down a little bit, clean this with a paper towel, get all the moisture off of it, put dry Verm in it. And I like to discard the rings because you're going to need some rings in your cooking pan, and you can get these at Walmart. Almost everything that I'm showing you comes from Walmart. And drill your holes in it just like they show you to punch the holes in the videos through the metal rings. Put it on, put a layer of aluminum foil on it, and it's ready to go in your steamer and steam. One of the important parts of the videos that they show is you need to put 2 layers of jar lids to space this up to where your jars aren't getting the heat that's at the bottom of the pan. It'll dry them out too much and it doesn't work. So you want those in, set your jars in, water just a 1/2 inch above the top of that foil is sufficient. Turn it on high, let it come to a boil. When it starts steaming, when it starts boiling, then start 90-minute timer and turn the heat down to half heat. You want it to stay boiling, but you want it at the lowest heat you possibly can and it stay boiling so you don't run out of water. I usually look at it at 40 to 50 minutes in just to make sure, and if it is running low, you can go ahead and add a little bit of water and still keep your same time. After it's finished to cook, let it set for overnight, usually is what I do, to where it's completely cool, and then you can start your inoculation the next day, So these are one other point I forgot is they show in the video to put micropore tape over these. It's not necessary, it's outdated information, you don't need it. The dry worm layer that you've got on top is what your contamination filter is going to be. So when you put everything in your still air box, I always use just the cheap Walmart disinfectant and spray everything before I put it in. And then glove up, rub your hands with alcohol, your forearms, and of course, I'd be working inside the still air box, you know, but you couldn't see it. So one of the biggest things I have people tell me when I'm mentoring them, you know, trying to help them online, is when you plunge this needle in these holes, it's going through that substrate, and some of it goes up inside that needle. So when you inoculate, you want to hold the jar like this, stick it in where your needle is at an angle to where it's sliding right along that glass. And then when you get it all the way in, pull it out about 1/4 of an inch before you try to inject. Because if you don't, this will be real hard sometimes, and then it'll break loose. And instead of 1/4 cc that you need for each hole, you're gonna pump a cc in, you know. And the best you can get out, you know, it's a 10 cc syringe. So the best you're gonna get is 10 jars if it comes out perfect, you know. So, but after, you know, one hole, pull it out, twist it. Don't have to flame this, you know, you need to flame it before each jar to stop cross-contamination. You know, if you happen to have contamination in one jar, you don't want to move it to the next one. But each of these 4 holes, you just flame it once, inject them, flame it again, start your next jar. There's no special, like I say, that incubation chamber is only for real special situations. But mine sit in the pantry, in the kitchen, you know, at the back of a shelf in the pantry, and I don't do anything with them except look at them every couple days, you know, to inspect for contamination. I'm gonna go over real quick contaminations. You know, they're pretty much limited to about 4 or 5. You're gonna have green, which is penicillin or trick, black, rarely, and it's just a mold. There's one called cobweb that is real wispy white, but it'll have little black dots in it. And then there's a lipstick mold that's red, and like a yellowish cover that is a bacterial infection. It's the one you can tell it, if you smell it, it smells like rotten apples, you know. Anytime you've got a contamination, the best thing to do is take it out of the house and bury it. Don't ever open it up in the house, because especially with the green trick, it sporulates, and you'll have to do a thorough disinfecting of your growing area before you'll ever successfully grow again, because the spores are sticky. Birthing. When the jars are done, usually it takes between 14 and 21 days for it to be 100% colonized. I always write the date that I inoculate it in magic marker or Sharpie, and then the day that all the visible area, the bottom and the sides, are completely white, mark it, and that's your colonization finish date, your 100% date. 7 days from then is when you can birth it. You want to give it 7 additional days called consolidation time for the mycelium to reach the innermost parts of the substrate. At the end of that time, then you can just go to the sink. You know, you're past sterile conditions at that point. Open them up, have a bowl, take all the dry worm the dry worm layer off, pop it on your hand, rinse it in tap water, throw it in a pan full of water, When you get them all in there, take a couple bowls or whatever it takes to keep them submerged so they hydrate. Put a lid on it, set it in the refrigerator for 24 hours, take it back out, rinse it off again, have you a bowl of the dry vermiculite, throw it in there and roll it and get some of that to stick on it. And what I used when I was still doing these is just use these discarded rings to set on top. You're gonna put some, you'll see this in the videos too, but those get filled with a 4 to 5 inch layer of wet perlite, the white perlite stuff that you can get. And you just set this on top of it and set your cake right on top of it. That way it gets the most humidity coming up. You can use full squares, but usually the foil is going to be bigger than what the bottom of your cake is, so this works best. If you're going to the double tubs and do it, then there's a couple other steps. You've got to make a core vermiculite gypsum substrate, and the birthing's a little different. So the core verm, you can either do in 5 gallon or 2 gallon. You do the core comes in 8 inch by 4 1/4 inch bricks, 3 for $10 at PetSmart, places like that. It's actually lizard bedding. It's called Eco Earth. And the recipe for this is throw use 1 brick of core, 2 quarts of vermiculite, and a 1/4 cup of gypsum, and then 3 1/2 quarts of water, boiling water. I like to take the core bricks and I'll take a chisel or a screwdriver, and you can break it into thinner chunks and then break that up by hand and get it down to where it's like the size of a quarter or $1/2 at biggest. Put it in, put your 2 quarts of vermiculite in, 1/4 cup of gypsum, boil the water, pour it in, put the lid on, just set it on, because if you seal it airtight and come back to it the next day, it'll look like an hourglass. It'll never look like a bucket again. Don't ask me how I know that. When you come back to it, you need to get in there and mix it up, because there'll still be some of those chunks of core that don't hydrate. And you need to break those all up, and mix them in, mix it real well. And the final step with it is you need to check the field capacity. And that's just grabbing a handful of it, and with a slight squeeze, you shouldn't see any water drip at all. But if I squeeze it really hard, that's what you want. If you squeeze it and it streams, it's too wet. Add a 1/4 cup, a 1/2 cup of vermiculite, remix it, retest it. Okay, now this part here, there's a lot of controversy in the cultivation communities now that boiling water effectively pasteurizes this mix. And I agree, it probably does. The problem is I'm gonna get in here with my hands and mix it up. I'm gonna have this lid off in room air, so I don't know what's gonna get in here. So I learned how to pasteurize it on a separate step. I don't know yet if it's necessary or not, but it ain't, it's kind of like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This has worked for me doing it, so I haven't stopped. I will try it here in the near future so I can pass it on. So before I go to the pasteurization process, if you've got a chop saw, I don't know if you could do this any other way, but if you've got a power chop saw, you can take these bricks and cut them into quarters and do a quarter batch. This makes 11 quarts of substrate, and you only need 2 for one of these double tubs. So you got a bunch that you're gonna be just sitting around waiting. If you cut it in quarters, the recipe becomes a quarter brick core, 2 cups of vermiculite, a tablespoon of gypsum, and 3.5 cups of water. And it makes about 2 3/4 quarts. So you don't have a whole lot that you're wasting, you know, it'll just fill 1 tub. If you're gonna try the no pasteurization method, the way it's done is an hour after you poured the water in, open this up, break up those chunks, mix it, and check, you know, just make sure everything's mixed good, then put the lid back on. It'll still be hot, but your hands will be able to stand it. And 2 to 3 hours later, take a thermometer, meat thermometer, and stick it down in the core of that substrate and check the temperature. As soon as it's below 80, it can be spawned. So if you're gonna do this way, you wanna do this the day that you want to put your tub together, you know, and as soon as it drops down through that 80-degree mark, then you start preparing the tub. If you pasteurize, you pack it in quart jars, cover it with a double layer of aluminum foil, take a meat thermometer and set the little tab here to where it's going halfway down. Same with the water. I've got a double layer of jar lids in there to where it's up. Bring the water up just on the bottom of these. Turn it on high on your burner and watch the thermometer. And when it gets to 138 degrees, you slide it off the burner and it'll keep rising, usually to around 157 to 160. The goal for pasteurization is to keep between 140 and 170 degrees for 90 minutes. So you watch it, when it starts, it'll start dropping again. When it gets to 150, put it back on the burner on high, and it'll probably keep continuing to drop, but it won't get below 140. But as soon as you see it start to rise again, then take it off the burner, and that'll usually get you through your full 90-minute cook. So now we've got pasteurized core, we've got our BRF cakes are ready. You set the still air box up, like I say, make it to where you can prop it open, you know, and work in it. Take your bottom tub, wipe it with a alcohol-soaked paper towel, and turn it upside down, let it dry. Do the same with the top. And then this is micropore tape, and you cut these. I thought I had a piece. When I strip the paper off of them, you want to fold the very end of it to itself so it sticks instead of here to where you can grab a hold of it to get it off when it goes into fruiting condition. The top, same thing, wipe it out. Take a small handful of this polyfill pillow stuffing at Walmart for $3, and it'll hold itself in there. I mean, it's just a small batch. Just take your fingers and stuff it through there to where you get enough that it's holding it both ways. Set it down on it, you know, I use it on my cabinets, and I've already Lysoled them to where they're sitting on a fairly clean environment. When you get to this point, you're past sterile conditions, so it's not near as important to have a sterile environment. The birthing of the cakes on this method is the same. Scrape off the dry verm layer into a bowl, pop the cake out. I always have a alcohol-soaked paper towel in there. Wipe off just the top of it in case there was any contamination in that dry verm layer and you've, pushed it down there. Wipe that off, and then have some gallon Ziploc bags, 2 of them, in your chamber, and put 4 in each bag. close the bag, and just through the bag, knead and break and crumble them just as much as you can. You want it as small pieces as you can get. Take one of your quarts of substrate, open the bag, put it in there on each one, close it, mix it up real well, dump them both in your bottom tub. It's going to bring it up to, you know, a 1/4 inch below the bottom of these 3/4 inch holes. And you just kind of smooth it out. I try and save this much, you know, a couple of inches of one of the quarts of substrate. And once it's leveled out, you'll have some of that white BRF cake that's sitting on top. And just try and get those covered with just enough to where you can't see them, you know, to where it colonizes. It'll help your pin set when it goes into fruit. It'll pin more even. Once you got that done, take your top, set it on, and Scotch tape. I just take one piece that'll pretty much go on one side, and this is a tricky part because you've got to kind of hold this with your fingers to keep it even or it won't seal on the end. And have that piece of tape. Oh, I forgot one thing. De-glove. You know, you're gloved up when you're doing this, but when you get to this point, take your gloves off because it's impossible to work with that Scotch tape with a pair of latex gloves. And just real gently put this side on and keep it even. And then once you've got it even, you can kind of press it, turn it around, do the other side, do the two ends. And from this point on, there's no maintenance. It can go on a closet, shelf, anywhere in the house. It just needs a little bit of ambient light. If you got it in the closet, turn the light on and leave it on during the day. All they need, light is not why they grow, you know. The only reason they need light is orientation, so they'll know which way's up. If you grow them in complete darkness, they'll grow in corkscrews, go every which way. So that's that. Usually about 14 days, you'll start getting some pins that you can see on the sides and the bottom. Some people today are using cheap plastic trash can liners and making a liner for these, and they say that it'll stop the pinning. I tried it one time, but I was using the heavier plastic and it didn't work, so I just quit doing it. Because what I do is, as soon as you see that first pin, you need to pull this micropore off and stuff polyfill in it. These are your gas exchange and fresh air exchange. The reason that you have to fan and mist these is that those cakes, as fungus grows, it breathes oxygen and gives off carbon dioxide just like humans. Carbon dioxide is heavier than air, so it sinks to the bottom of the terrarium, and carbon dioxide inhibits mushroom growth. So that's what you're doing with the fanning, is you're dispelling that gas. So these holes in the bottom and the holes in the top is what controls your gas exchange and your fresh air exchange. You can tell that you've got this set up and it is working right within 2 days of putting it together. You'll have a lot of condensation on this top, except for maybe a 1/2 inch around each one of these polyfill deals, and it'll be just as clear as can be. And when it's like that, you know that your moisture content, your humidity's good, your fresh air exchange is good. So it's ready to harvest. You untape it and pick everything that's on the cake, on the top of the cake. Don't try and pick anything that's grown up along the side because it'll break off. So pick everything here. When it's picked, put your hand on top of the cake, turn it upside down, I forgot one thing. You pull that polyfill that's in there out, and you can just lift this off and you've got the upside down cake. You can pick everything on the sides and the bottom, take a water bottle that you've boiled water in and filled up while, right after it was boiled so it's sterile. Spritz it pretty heavy, pretty heavy mist. Set the tub back on it, turn it over, spray the top real good, tape the tub back on, and another 14 days you'll be ready to harvest again. I've tried it for 3 flushes, and the third flush is usually so dismal that it's really not worth the time. I mean, so that's the way I do it. Pull the polyfill in the bottom one before you turn this over so you can get the cake out. And then put the cake back in and tape it back up before you put polyfill back in it, because it's hell getting that tape around there when you got that puff of polyfill. And like I say, we're not looking at sterile conditions anymore for the most part, so it doesn't hurt for it to be out. And then stuff it back in. Drying and long-term storage. You can dry them with a dehydrator. I don't like it, some people do. Without any heat, it's all right. I just think that it kind of degrades the product with heat, so I've always used a fan. You need some kind of a rack, that'll keep the mushrooms off the surface that you're drying them on. So this is just a $2 paint grate from Walmart, a piece of aluminum screen, and you set that down, get you a small fan, and usually in 2 days they'll be leather dry. If you've never grown them before and you don't know what leather dry is, what I suggest doing is weigh them when they're fresh, and get an idea. I've got 100 grams. They're 90% water. After a couple days, you think they're leather dry. If you weigh them and they weigh 80 grams, you're within 10 grams of what your final weight should be. So go ahead, and at that point, you need a final dry chamber to suck that last bit of moisture out of it. These are about $5 at Walmart. These are a Damp Rid moisture absorber. They're at Walmart too. Almost everything I've got here came from Walmart.
Are they sponsoring?
No. And what you're going to get is it's got a bag of Damp Rid crystals that are moisture absorbers. And you don't want it touching your medicine. And it comes with this bucket and this thing. And the way these are supposed to be used is you dump this in the bottom of this, put this in there and set it in a closet, and it absorbs moisture. So what I do with it is I just take this and one of these plastic lids, put it right there, pour this stuff all around it up even to it, put the medicine in here, set it on there, snap it shut and burp it. And 2 days, you open it up, you should be able to take a stem and snap. It should snap just like a matchstick. That's cracker dry. Once they're cracker dry, you can make a desiccant pack. I use Tyvek envelopes and cut the bottom 2 inches that's sealed, and then cut about that much of it, tape up that side, put some of these Damp Rid crystals in it, tape up the other side, a couple of them like that in the jar, put your meds, your cracker dry meds in there, use an original lid, an old sock to keep the light out, and it lives in the bottom of my bottom dresser drawer. And I've used, usually they don't last me a year, but I have had some that were almost a year and still just as potent as they were the day that they came out.